All right, now we're going to talk about weed pulls. And before we get started in weed pulls, just know it is a lifelong contract of working and training weed pulls. I make it sound very difficult, but I want to make sure that you know that not to get frustrated ahead of time if this is going to go into the smallest steps in the world. For some dogs, they're just going to blaze into weed pull training, and I'm going to show you some techniques. I'm going to show you how to start with 2x2s and channel weed pulls today. And you can take that information and apply it to your dog the best way you can. But if I was to own any pieces of agility equipment with my dogs, I would heavily invest into weed pulls first. Or the three things I'd like to invest in are weed pulls, jumps, and tunnels, as we've seen here in this training series. Don't worry about the contact equipment. These will take a while, and you want to make sure to get your hands on something that you can utilize regularly in your own backyard. So we're going to start off with Mochi here, and then I'm going to move over to the channel weed pulls with Disney. But to start them off, I have 4 set up here, but I'm actually going to only have 2 to start with. When I actually work these, a lot of times I'll use like lots of different colors and stripes and things, because there's a lot sometimes of different types of agility poles out there. So like there's some as you can see, there's some solid colored ones, white ones, striped ones, you know, just get your dog used to all the different types. Yes, good boy. What you're going to do is wait for them to initiate the weed pulls. Yes, and then search and reward. So maybe that was a good example of what not to do with the dog. Don't toss the cookie ahead of time necessarily. Yes, good boy. It's actually really good for them to learn how to initiate the weed pulls. Yes, good boy. And go through the middle versus you tossing the cookie ahead of them. Yes, good job. Yes, good boy. You can see himself correct there that time. Yes, good boy. Go. And by doing all these jump behaviors, good job. Yes, get it. And things like that. Yes, good boy. He's actually learned to initiate or take obstacles that are in front of him. This is great. I'm actually adding a little bit more distance, letting him get ahead of me a little bit, because I don't necessarily always have to escort my dog into the weed pulls. Yes, switching sides, make sure he's doing on my left, doing on my right, and back and forth. So that was a really good job. And he's doing so good that I'm going to actually pull out another. And then you can, so once your dog says pretty good, 2, you start to add another 2. Yes, good boy. A little head. Yes, good boy. Excellent work. A little 2. Yeah, that was really good on his part. Good boy. Yes, good job. Now, of course, when he eats the cookie and comes back straight onto the poles, it makes it super simple for him to learn to jump back in. But what I can actually start to do with the cookies a little bit is when I toss the cookie, I could toss them at an angle. Yes, and so I can toss it to the left a little bit, so he's going to have to do a little soft turn entry into the poles. Yes, good boy. That was straight ahead there. I'm going to try to get another soft entry here. Well, that's actually a little harder entry, but let's see what happens. Yes, good boy. Good job. Super. And going back and forth, back and forth. Yes, good boy. And then what you're going to do eventually with this is that you're going to actually start to turn these more and more. And the dog is always going to enter in with their left shoulder into the weed pulls. So make sure you adjust this so that when the dog enters their left poles, because what's going to happen eventually is when the dogs actually go into weaving poles, they're going to weave with their left shoulder into the weave poles and then exit with their left shoulder that way. So it's important that you, and sometimes it's easier to set them up straight and then tilt them for some people. And then you'd actually have them go back and forth like this. Because if you do it backwards, where if you accidentally go like this, where the pole is like that, now the dog is entering in with their right shoulder, and we don't want that. So when you're adjusting your 2x2s, make sure, or your channels or whatever, make sure the dog is always entering in with their left shoulder. So next time I do this with him, this is somewhere where I would start with him. So that way he starts seeing it, and it's a little harder for him to split the gap. But since he did so good, we're going to leave it as is. I'm going to bring out Mr. Disney, and we're going to do some channel weed pulls. Make sure to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any future videos here on the Doggy Dojo. And if you have any questions or comments or anything, you can put it down below, in the comment section. Now let's get back to training. All right, so let's talk about channel weave pulls now. You can actually do both. You don't have to just do 2x2s or just do channel weave pulls. You can do both. I find that sometimes 2x2s helps with like the entry side of dog weave pulls, where the channel weave pulls helps with like driving a line and staying in the pulls. And that's just my own personal experience with my dogs. So if you have the ability to either A, get yourself some 2x2s and some channel weave pulls, great. Or I almost would recommend just getting the channel weave pulls like this. And I'll make sure I provide a link for you guys to get these channel weave pulls, because I got these online and they're fantastic and they weren't too expensive. But as you guys can see here, they're very similar setup to the 2x2 situation. And what I'm going to do with Disney is very similar, and I'm just going to have them on one side, go from one side to the other. And there's so many ways to teach weave pulls, but these are just some of the ways that Disney actually learned to do it. But eventually what you can do is say, he's drilling, break, get it, good boy, super, awesome, break, get it, good job. And just go back and forth and let the dog know that if you go through the channel here, you're going to get it. And then what's going to happen over time, and I'm just going to go ahead and get to that point for you guys, like if we were like a few training sessions in, is you're going to start to get these to be more and more narrow. And the dog's going to have to learn to navigate that. And they're going to go straight through it. Ready? Break. Good. Yes. So one of the biggest mistakes a lot of weave pull people do is, our dogs are always faster than us. So we want to make sure that we're never hindering them from moving on ahead of us. So tossing search cookies can be very helpful. Having a treat target down there, having the treat and train down at the bottom can also be very helpful. So, but if we are asking our dogs to go weave, and then we're giving our dog a cookie at the end, look how he has to turn into my body, and he's not driving a straight line anymore. And I'm going to do this a couple times, and we're going to see what happens if I just do this a couple times, what Disney will start to do, because you saw him driving a straight line earlier. So if I ask him to weave, and then I go and give him a cookie over here, they're going to start to turn into your body to get the weave pulls. So we're going to go back this way. And let's just see, just those 2 times of rewarding him at my person, me, instead of ahead with a search cookie or something. Let's just see what happens at the end of the weave pulls if I'm not tossing a search cookie ahead and I'm behind. Weave. Oh, I love it. He's such a good boy. He didn't do what I thought he'd do, but he actually had that issue earlier on, that when I reward at me, always at me, treating at me, then the dog will go through the weave pulls and then turn at the last pull to come back to you to get reinforcement. And that becomes a big, big issue. So it's important that we either use that treat and train that we've been using, a treat bowl, a treat target at the end of the pulls. The hardest part with because these can be so easily missed, like when you start getting more and more narrow, it's easier for them to pop out, not get their entry correct. And if they run down and get the cookie that's just in a bowl, then they're getting reinforcement for not doing the full behavior. So having a treat and train, having somebody down there, being really good at your search skills, toss searching skills, can be very helpful in this exercise. Weave. Yes, good job. Of course, Disney is experienced and is at master level, but you're not going to see this level of proficiency with your dog on the very first session. But I just want to give you guys an insight or preview of what's to come with the weave pull training and how to get our dogs in this, because as much as I had talked up how hard and arduous and difficult weave pull training can be, it can actually be quite simple if you just break it down to the fact that they're just driving a line down the center of the poles without you having to necessarily be involved with that. And that's including the entry into the weave pulls, which we'll discuss as we get further along. We'll make sure that the dog's not having to use us to wrap around to get into the poles. And all these things I'm talking to you about are the things that I've learned because I've made these mistakes. And I'm hoping that I'm trying to prevent you guys from making similar mistakes. That we want the dog to learn to drive ahead of us, and so we don't have to be a part of the weave pull part of agility, that we can actually go send them into the weave pulls and take off and go somewhere else. And that is very hard for them to do. Thanks for watching here on the Doggy Dojo. And if you have any questions or comments, put them down below. And as always, have some fun with your dogs, and we'll see y'all next time.